Let me ask you something. Do you believe that 18% of Americans are millionaires? Yeah, you've probably seen that headline somewhere. But here's what nobody tells you. Half of these people can't even pull $1,000 out without selling their own house. They're millionaires on paper but living broke in practice. Today, I'm going to show you why that number is a big lie, and what's the one number that actually matters for you. I'm Cave, and welcome back to the channel. Before we continue, if you want to truly understand how money works in this country, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps a ton. So let's get straight to the point. The Federal Reserve reports that 18% of American households have a net worth above $1 million. Sounds like a lot, right? The problem is that this number includes the value of your house, and this is where the devil's in the details. When you take the house value out of that equation, you know what happens? That number drops to somewhere between 8% and 10%. That's right, less than half. Why? Because for most American families, their home represents half or even more of their total net worth. Now here comes the part nobody talks about. The median net worth, including everything, is around $192,000. But if you take the house out of the equation, that number plummets to just $57,900, $57,000. That's the reality of the typical American family in terms of assets that can actually generate income. And look, your house definitely counts as part of your net worth. I'm not saying it doesn't. But there's a massive difference between having wealth on paper and having wealth that can pay your bills every month. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine two families. Both have exactly $1 million in net worth. Family A has a $200,000 house and $800,000 in investments. Family B has an $800,000 house and only $200,000 in investments. Now, using a conservative withdrawal rate of 4.7%, let's see how much income each can generate. Family A can pull almost $38,000 per year from investments. Family B, only $9,400. You see the difference? Same net worth on paper, but one family generates 4 times more income than the other. One can retire comfortably. The other can barely supplement their electric bill. That's why I always recommend you track 2 versions of your net worth, one that includes your house and one that excludes it. That second number tells you the truth about how much money you actually have available to generate income when you retire. Now let's talk about retirees specifically, because that's where the story gets interesting. When you hit 65, 69 years old, theoretically you've had decades to save and invest, right? The data shows that the median investable net worth for people in this age range reaches about $238,000. If you're in the 75th percentile, that number jumps to approximately $784,000. And if you're in the top 10%, the 99th percentile, we're talking about roughly $2.3 million. And here's something fascinating. At this wealth level, home equity represents only 20% to 30% of the total. In other words, people with high net worth have most of their wealth in financial assets that can generate income, not in bricks and mortar. And there's more. The vast majority of wealth in the United States is concentrated in people who are about to retire or already retired. Makes total sense when you think about it. They've had an entire career to accumulate. Now here comes a really interesting data point. If we take just retirees and look at how many have $1 million or more in investable assets, excluding the house, that number falls between the 75th and 95th percentile. That means approximately 20% to 25% of retirees have crossed that $1 million mark in pure financial assets, 1 in 5 retirees. Does that sound like a lot? Does it sound like a little? Depends on your perspective. But here it gets even more interesting. If we look only at individual retirement accounts, like IRAs and 401ks, the number of people with $1 million or more drops drastically to about 3%. And even those numbers are probably understated. Why? Because the data looks at one account at a time. If you have $500,000 at Vanguard and another $500,000 at Fidelity, you have $1 million in investments, but you won't show up as a millionaire on either company's report. So why is it so hard to know exactly how many millionaires exist? Why don't we have a precise and definitive number? Well, there are several reasons. First, accounts are too fragmented. Most people have a retirement account, brokerage account, bank account, maybe a high-yield savings account, some cash, an old 401k from a previous job, maybe a trust fund, or even a crypto portfolio, all spread across different institutions. And here's the problem. There's no legal requirement forcing you to consolidate all of this in one place. There's no field on your tax return that says, put your total net worth here. It simply doesn't exist. Unlike salaries, which are reported to the IRS through W-2s and 1099s, there's no obligation to centrally report household assets and balances. Tax returns show interest, dividends, maybe minimum distributions from retirement accounts, but they don't show the complete picture. Second problem, surveys depend on self-reporting, and high net worth families are frequently underrepresented or simply refuse to give exact numbers. Plus, surveys cap extreme values. If a billionaire responds to the survey, their net worth won't appear as the real number, it'll show as above $30 million, or something like that. This protects privacy but means we lose precision at the top of the pyramid. Third, there's the valuation question. How do you value your pension? How do you value your life insurance? Does it have monetary value? And what about illiquid assets like private company stakes, collectibles, or even crypto that's traded outside the traditional system? And think about it. Most people value privacy, whether for security, tax reasons, or personal discretion. So there's a natural incentive to understate or simply not disclose your total net worth. You don't build wealth to put it in a national database. You build it for your security and your family's future. Lastly, there's timing. Net worth is volatile. The market moves and surveys are done periodically. By the time data is released, it may already be outdated. Think about it. Has anyone ever officially asked you to add up all your accounts? All bank accounts? All brokerages? All assets? Highly unlikely. And even if they had, how accurate would you be? That's why all these numbers are estimates, not absolute truths. And speaking of accounts people forget about, here's a wild statistic. There are approximately 32 million forgotten or completely untouched 401(k) plans in the United States. These plans together hold over $2 trillion in assets. $2 trillion. So before you start comparing yourself to statistics, it's worth asking, did I include all my accounts? Did I forget some old 401(k) from a job 5 years ago? The largest source of wealth data in the US comes from the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances. This survey happens every 3 years and interviews between 4,000 and 6,500 households. They try to oversample wealthy families to identify where wealth is concentrated. Then they use statistical weighting to extrapolate these thousands of responses to represent 132 million households across the entire country. It's considered the gold standard for US wealth data because it tries to capture everything from checking accounts to small businesses and your car's value. But remember, it's still a survey based on self-reporting. At best, these are educated estimates. Now let's talk about something that's even more important than the numbers. Wealth isn't just a number. It's a social and relative concept. Much of our perception about wealth comes from comparison. It's not just about your account balance, it's about what that money allows you to do, the kind of life you live, and how that compares to the people around you. Having $1 million in rural Kansas versus having $1 million in San Francisco are two completely different universes. In one place, it means a spacious house and budget breathing room. In the other, it means a modest apartment and living paycheck to paycheck. Numbers also deceive across countries. You could have 5.9 million Philippine pesos or 8.9 million Indian rupees. Sounds like a fortune, right? But when you convert it, it comes to about $100,000. Context matters. Where you live determines purchasing power. Economists call this relative income or positional goods. The meaning of wealth doesn't just depend on the raw number in your account, but on what it buys compared to the people around you. So if you just want the summarized statistics, here it is. About 18% of American households are millionaires if you include home equity. If you exclude the house, that number drops to 8% to 10% of the total population. Among retirees, about 20% to 25% have $1 million in investable assets, but only 3% have that just in retirement accounts. And at the end of the day, the value of that million depends entirely on context, where you live, how you spend, and how much it makes you feel secure. But more important than any comparison, what are some practical measures you can take to increase your net worth? First, track your net worth regularly, and do it 2 ways. Have one version that includes your house value and another that excludes it. That second version gives you a much clearer picture of the assets you can turn into income when you retire. How often should you do this? Quarterly is a good start. Every 3 months gives you a clear view of progress without getting too lost in the daily market noise, or do it annually for a complete analysis. Once a year, you do a total assessment, update all accounts, all assets, all debts, and compare year over year. Save those annual statements because it's really powerful to see progress over time. Second, don't obsess over $1 million. It's a nice round number, but by itself, it's a meaningless goal. What you need to figure out is how much income your assets need to generate to live the life you want. That means discovering your personal number. Ask yourself, what kind of life do I want to have in retirement? Calculate what that costs. From there, determine the portfolio size needed to sustain that lifestyle. It might be more than $1 million. It might be less. The important thing is that it's your number. Focus on income, not just assets. Convert your investments into approximate annual income using a withdrawal rate. Figure out what rate is comfortable for you. Maybe 3.5%, maybe 4%, maybe 4.7%. See how much your portfolio could realistically provide. Third, control what you can control. You don't control what the market does day to day, but you can control your savings rate, your spending habits, and the diversification level of your investments. Markets go up and down. One year, your assets might cross 7 figures. The next, they might fall below that. Don't worry too much about those swings. What matters is that you're making consistent progress over time. And lastly, contextualize your wealth. Remember that location, cost of living, and healthcare expenses massively influence what your money can buy. $1 million in the Midwest is very different from $1 million in Manhattan. The real lesson here isn't whether your net worth crosses some magical 7-figure line. It's the lifestyle you can build with your investable assets. Don't compare yourself to headlines. Compare yourself to your own goals. And remember, all these statistics I've shown are estimates, not exact numbers written in stone. Take everything with a grain of salt. Next time you see a headline about millionaires, don't blindly accept it. Ask yourself, what assets are included? What's being excluded? And more importantly, what can that wealth actually do for someone's life? At the end of the day, it's not just about money. It's about freedom, security, and the life you want to live. And the only number that truly matters is your number. The number that gets you to the life you want to have. So what do you think? Share in the comments what your number is. I post new videos every week, so if this changed how you think about wealth, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. See you next time.